Nottinghamshire is a great place to live, work or visit. As your fire and rescue service, we are proud to say that we've been rated good at what we do in protecting and serving our communities. We are good at keeping people safe and secure, being efficient in how we do this, and at looking after our people. Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. When you need us, we are here for you. Nottinghamshire is a great place to live, work or visit. As your fire and rescue service, we are proud to say that we've been rated good at what we do in protecting and serving our communities. We are good at keeping people safe and secure, being efficient in how we do this, and at looking after our people. Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. When you need us, we are here for you. Nottinghamshire is a great place to live, work or visit. As your fire and rescue service, we are proud to say that we've been rated good at what we do in protecting and serving our communities. We are good at keeping people safe and secure, being efficient in how we do this, and at looking after our people. Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. When you need us, we are here for you.
Okay, welcome to the meeting, everyone. So, just want to make some progress. He's always on the wire. We'll wait for you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we'll make another start. Item 1, apologies for absence. We're all here, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. Declarations of interest, any? None? Minutes meeting held on the 1st of July 2022 for confirmation. Three?
Yeah, good.
You happy?
Yeah.
Human Resources Update, item 4, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware this is a report that we get at each of your meetings just to provide you with an update on our key HR metrics, so recruitment, establishment and other things that we want to bring to during the period. Just to say that this report is a little bit unusual in that because we missed our last meeting in November, which was postponed. It does cover a longer period. So for the establishment figures, it covers the period 1st of June to 30th December, to the end of last year. But for the absence data, its report is from 1st of April to 30th September last year. That's just because of the way we report the data. So you will get a later update at your next meeting. So just to explain the context of the figures, really. So just taking you quickly through the report. Staffing numbers, which is the first item into the report, looks at the different groups of employees in terms of our workforce numbers, and it breaks them down. We actually, at the end of December, had a workforce figure of 804 employees, but that includes 70 people who we call dual contractors. So they're people who are whole-time firefighters, but also provide cover for the on-call. I think we spoke about that group before, so that figure does include those people as well. In terms of variance, you'll see from the table that we had, at the end of the year, 20 vacancies on our whole-time establishment, and it says 5 vacancies for our support establishment, but if you look at numbers of FTEs, which is the number of people perhaps who are working part-time hours and everything, it's about 10 vacancies overall, which actually, for those of you who could recall previous figures, is really a good improvement in terms of recruitment into support roles during that period. So the report does highlight there the numbers of leavers during the course of that time. The numbers of leavers are in line with our expectations for the period. So the next report looks at workforce planning, and we do assume and project the numbers of leavers that we think we might have during the course of the year, based on retirements and sort of previous turnover and things like that. So in terms of our operational workforce, we're broadly in line and at the place we thought we would be at this time of year. For our support staff, it's a little bit of a different picture, and I know we've had this conversation before at previous meetings about the levels of turnover we were seeing in our support staff roles, which members may know as Green Book roles. So they're the roles, the supporting roles that we undertake mainly here at Joint Headquarters, but also some of the roles that are out on station. And the narrative we were seeing as the time was going by was that we were getting high levels of turnover in that group. We have done some work around that, and I'm glad to report that by the end of this year we were seeing that turnover slowing down, and so I think we are in a much better position now in terms of recruitment into our support roles, which of course is really critical in terms of delivery and in terms of delivering on our wider service objectives. So that's perhaps a piece of good news to come out of this report, really, is that we are seeing that slow down, and we have actually, in the course of that time, I think, taken on some really good new staff. I think we're seeing that across all departments, really, that the quality of people that are coming in is really quite high. So that, you know, that's something to celebrate, really, I suppose. The second part of the report looks at our sickness absence figures, and it's broken down quite a lot there into, again, the different work groups and the numbers of sickness days lost and percentages. I think probably the easiest way of looking at it is to look at the appendices, because that really sums it up. So if you look at Appendix A, that breaks down absence into the different work groups and into the workforce overall. And you can see there that the sort of peaks and troughs that we go through for each quarter. I suppose the most significant thing to draw from that is that compared to the same period of last year, there has been a reduction in overall absence across all the work groups. The other thing that we set out in the report is we still are reporting on COVID figures. This is because when it was at its height, obviously COVID and absence related to COVID represented quite a lot of the reasons that people were absent from work. We did expect that to be going down. It has gone down, but it is still there. And during this period, it was about 17% of total absence still. So we'll see how that works through. At the moment, we will still look at the figures with COVID and without COVID, because I think it does, to a certain extent, affect the way that we're looking at absence. So the COVID figures are still in this report. We'll have a look at the next report to see if we still need to do that, to see where the trend is going. But the other thing to pull out of the report in terms of national absence trends, so members will know that we're reporting to a national survey across most fire and rescue services of employee absence. And what we have found during the course of this year is certainly for operations staff, we are just above the national absence average. But for our support staff, we are just above it. So we are doing some work to look at why that is, what we can do about it, and to look at the reasons for that absence. Finally, on Appendix C, we set out there the reasons, the top 10 reasons for absence amongst each of the work groups, because that helps us to identify if there are any trends or anything that we particularly should be looking at. I think what you can see from there is that it's pretty much across the board. There are different reasons. Musculoskeletal and mental health issues continue to be the two top reasons that people take sickness absence. And we've spoken before about the work we do to try and support staff in those areas. But no particular, I think, issue coming out in terms of reasons for sickness absence. So that's just to summarise the report. There are some other workforce metrics from 2.27 relating to numbers of grievances and other metrics like that. There really isn't a lot to report on there. There's been 2 dismissals from the service on the grounds of ill health since the last time that we met.
Okay, thanks for that. I think there's so fairly steady state on the workforce, really, in a sense. COVID's still there, but isn't the general population. And it's actually increased recently as well, I think. So, and so some work continued to be needed on kind of making sure that we're not just above the national average on figures, really, in a sense. Okay, any comments, questions? Tom?
Yeah, thank you, David. Very quick one with regards to, I suppose, really, from my understanding and members' understanding, with regards to the absence. It's fair to say that if you take Cambridge out, which heaven knows what's going on there, and obviously many of the authorities that we mostly compare to, as an example, Derbyshire, they seem to be doing considerably better than us. Do we have a reason? Does it tend to be a small number of our whole-time staff that are off for prolonged periods? Is there big injuries amongst a couple of individuals that may skew it internally for us? And then, I suppose, using the average, I mean, I've always not been a massive fan of these stats sometimes, because you can't really compare Nottinghamshire to London or Cambridge. And if you take some of those out, the average drops massively, and we're probably slightly above the line. That was my only concern. And then really, obviously you'll have been briefed in the same way we have with regards to flu likely to be a massive problem. Now, I know it's sadly causing many deaths in Nottinghamshire at the minute. With our staff coming closely in contact with vulnerable people, it's obviously likely that we'll be impacted by this quite tough strain flu. And I just wondered how we expect that to impact some of this as well.
Okay, so in terms of the overall figures, in terms of long-term absence, yes, that does form quite a significant part of our absence figures. So It's been anything between 62 and 71% during that period for most of our staff. So we define long-term absence as people who are obviously off with a GP certificate, a medical certificate, and are off for more than 28 days consecutively. So that's how we define long-term absence. So about 70% of that sickness absence would be quite serious, where people are taking time to obviously recovering and get back to work. What we try to do during that time, obviously, is to refer people through our occupational health team to give them the support we can give them. We keep in contact with them throughout that time with the view that we will try and get them back into work as soon as we can and they can enter back into the workplace. So we do, on a sort of monthly, 6-weekly basis, have case reviews of everybody who's actually on long-term absence. And we do ensure that we keep in contact with them because that's so important when people are on an extended period of absence, retaining that contact with the workplace and knowing sort of what's going on for them and what we can do for them when we need to do it. It's not always right to intervene. Early days, it depends on what the issue is. So work with them really to see how we can support them to come back. In terms of flu, we haven't seen, probably it's this quarter, which is the next reporting quarter, where we'll probably notice if the current flu, I don't think it's a pandemic yet, is it? But it seems to be gathering some pace. We have noticed anecdotally that there have been some quite nasty viruses going around. So my expectation probably would be that in the next report we will see that coming through. But that's a sort of seasonal thing. So around this time of year, seasonally, we do see some peaks, as you'll probably see from the graph itself. If that answers that.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah. Anybody else? I was happy to note the contents of the report for recommendation. Okay, thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 5, update on the workforce plan.
Okay, so this very much carries on really. So if you think of the update report being a sort of more short-term review of where we are, the workforce plan obviously looks at a 2-year look ahead. And we revise the workforce plan annually. We add another year onto the end so that we can see sort of over the next couple of years our expectations about workforce, particularly about workforce numbers and where we need to be putting resources, any new commitments or demands on us that might come up during that time. So members had a report about the revised workforce plan in July, so this is sort of the first review really since that period, and we're now coming into the period when actually I'll start reviewing it again and going into up to 2025, which is sort of 2025 is years, it's 2 years away, so we will start revising this again. But basically what the workforce plan seeks to do is to identify where we're going to have demand over that period, because as members will know, if we are recruiting particularly to operational apprentice firefighter roles and we need to fill some gaps in that establishment, it takes about 2 years for somebody to go through the recruitment process and then become competent through the apprenticeship framework. So it does take quite a lot of planning in the context of operational roles. So basically what the review is telling us is that turnover rates, as we previously said in the short-term report, are about where we think they would be at this time. So this takes us up to the end of December. So turnover rates for firefighters about 3.94%. Most of that is due to retirements, which we can predict and we do project forward. So we do know that those people will be leaving us. And what we did this year clearly is we coordinated a whole-time recruitment campaign because we knew that we were going to get these gaps. So we just completed that campaign and we'll be appointing to new apprenticeship firefighter roles from April. So that's part of this whole workforce planning of understanding when we're going to get the need and then planning obviously to fill behind it. So that's been quite a significant exercise for the whole service, but particularly for the HR team. I think we started off with about 400 and odd applicants, and I think we interviewed just over 100. So quite a resource-intensive time for us, but we look as though we have got really good tranche of candidates coming through. So we're really looking forward to working with them from April. We have appointed to some other whole-time roles during the course of the year to try to fill some of these gaps. So we had a migration process, which is allowing our on-call firefighters, who generally have another job and work with us on an on-call basis. Once a year, if we need to, we do go through a process whereby they can apply for whole-time roles. So we have gone through that process during the course of the year, and also appointed some of those to fill whole-time gaps. And we've also done what we call a transfer process. So that's firefighters in other fire and rescue services who may want to come and work with us in Nottingham, and we go through a process of appointing to gaps. So through the course of the year, we do various things to sort of try and address the gaps in the whole-time establishment. But I think, in the context of whole-time establishment, obviously, as we said, I hope in your section 2.5, we have had the backdrop of the efficiency strategy and some of the demands that all the things that are coming around because of the unpredictability of the budget, which I know the authority is working through. But obviously, in terms of workforce planning, it makes it that little bit more difficult to get that right. So that's where we are in terms of whole time. We would expect by April, certainly by the middle of next year, to be about at current establishment levels. The on-call establishment, again, just about where we thought we would be in terms of turnover. We continue to recruit throughout the year for on-call. We've got a turnover rate of about 7%. Which is slightly lower actually than we thought it might be. And we have appointed to 19 on-call roles during the course of that year, and we are actually currently just started a new course at SDC, so we have another, I think, 11 firefighters coming through on that course. So there's a lot of work that goes into on-call recruitment, and there is a specialist team that work with stations to try and encourage, obviously, people locally to come along to the station and take part in some of the activities and become interested in wanting to become an on-call firefighter. The support establishment we have, I know, spoken about throughout the year, and we've referenced it in the previous report. That is where we have been seeing a lot of turnover. We did do some work looking at exit interviews and the reasons that perhaps people were leaving. Tended to be, on the whole, a pay issue, which perhaps is not a surprise, but also things around development and the ability to move on within the organisation. So those are things that we are going to address and look at over the next year or so. We've put some information in there about the sorts of things we've done to try and make ourselves more attractive as an employer to candidates. So we've been working with designers to try and make our adverts stand out and make sure that people, we have the numbers coming through in terms of recruitment, and I think we are seeing that. So to provide some context to the level of turnover, we have appointed to 20 support roles during the course of that year. So, as I say, some really good people, I think, coming into the organisation. Just moving on to 2.17, talking about the efficiency strategy and the impact that is having and is likely to have on workforce going forward. I think it was one of those things where at the beginning we sort of couldn't foresee some of the budgetary pressures that we were going to get. So I know that through the efficiency strategy we're working through a workforce review, and that will obviously, the outcomes from that will be coming back to the authority. But looking forward to next year will obviously be a big part of our workforce planning. So there are things that might come out of that. And I think the other thing that perhaps we didn't build into the plan or foresee was obviously the potential for industrial action, because during the course of the year, as we all know, that potential has grown, particularly across the public sector. So again, that's a factor that for next year we will start to look at that in terms of the plan and how that might affect workforce and delivery of services. So I think that was what I was going to pick up, unless anybody's got any more questions.
Any questions, guys? Well, patience.
What do you do in terms of retention? Because after that, you should work on retention, retaining others.
Yeah.
So what do you do? The aspect of
It's a bit of a difficult one, because obviously what the exit questionnaires are telling us is sometimes, more often than not, pay might be an issue. And obviously we are guided by the national pay awards. Since we last met, we have had agreement of the Green Book Pay Award, which has averaged at, I think, at about 4.04% from April. And I think, that's helped. It's helped to bring us more in line with private sector salaries and things like that. We've been looking at things like how can we look at career progression and things like career graded posts, so that you have posts which are linked in grade and you have progression. People can see that they can move between grades if they take qualification or they take on additional responsibilities or duties, that there is actually a route that they can go through. So we are looking at things like that and trying to align that within different jobs within departments. I think as well it's about us being an employer of choice and the things that we do offer people through non-pay things. So we provide a lot of welfare and well-being support and things like that for employees. So it's, we have to make sure that we are promoting, I suppose, the things that make us different and better than other local employers. So that's mainly what we're trying to do. I think the workforce review, which will really pick up progress during the next course of the next year, will also address some of those issues for people in terms of perhaps a bit more flexibility in the jobs that they do.
Okay, well, I think there are two really good reports, basically. That's all right. Nigel?
Yeah, just forgive me, it may be a simple one, but what sort of links do you have with schools?
We do go along to careers events and things like that. Across the county, actually, I don't think we work with all schools. If we can, we will send, like one of Matt's teams mainly who go along. We always try and have an operational presence if we can as well at those events. As much as anything else, promote the service as well as, because we can't always sell.
So if you can sort of embed...
But embed us a bit more in those local communities as well and have a presence. And obviously sometimes we can talk about apprenticeships because I think there's a report later on the agenda. We are trying to develop that apprenticeship route as much as we can and actually start to develop people in-house. So, perhaps practice has been that we try and recruit people who are more or less competent in the role they're coming into, but actually perhaps what we need to do in the future is to put more time into developing people internally, bringing them through, putting them on a career grade and developing them ourselves. So, hopefully that's... I think
it's crucial in many of police the same as well. If you can get children involved with the fire brigade, with the police and organisations like that in an early age, when they get up to 16, 18, whatever it may be, where they're going to make the choices, they think, oh yeah, it's same with hospitals and nursing and so on. I think it's key sort of trying to build that relationship with the kids, with the children.
I know sort of when our prevention teams go out, and education teams go out, although they're not specifically going to jobs fairs or they're not specifically there for that reason, we do try and raise that as part of this is who we are. So as you say, people become interested, want to know a bit more, perhaps, that sort of thing. So we do try and sort of integrate it with the other work we do with our communities as well.
Canada.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think one of the issues we face is that everybody knows what a firefighter is. So everybody associates fire and rescue with that operational role. And one of the things that we're very conscious of and trying to address is the fact that there are a range of opportunities for different types of profession. within the service that perhaps aren't quite as glamorous or seemingly glamorous as people perceive firefighting to be. So that's something that we're looking to make sure that we address.
Thank you.
Okay, two good reports there, Tracy. I think recruitment campaigns might be intensive, but I think they work well. I think it helps to be ahead of the game, really, in a sense, really, and important to build that intelligence in, even if it isn't always necessarily clear. It still it helps to build that intelligence in because it gives you that direction for the future. And I think that the retention measures and apprenticeships are really important. So I think that workforce planning really well. I think it's probably one of the best places I've seen for workforce planning, to be honest. I don't think I've been seen anywhere else that's as good as workforce planning as I've seen in my short time here, really. So I think that's really good. Okay, so we'll move on to item 6. That's quality monitoring report.
Right. Okay, so this report covers the period April 22 to 30th September and to September 2022, so it's that 6-month period. And the purpose of the report is to obviously update members on progress, but also there's a recommendation in here to mainstream the reporting into this into the papers that Tracy brings. So we've got obviously the workforce plan paper, but we also have HR updates as well. So we're looking at bringing these figures into those reports in the future. So that's a recommendation within the report. In terms of the workforce numbers for this period, there was a reduction overall, but there's a slight increase in the number of firefighters that we're reporting. And so that kind of does affect some of the percentages that we're reporting in this report. Female figures for firefighting, numbers of firefighters are level. I know there's a slight dip in the report at 2.1 in the bar chart, but the numbers are the same. Slight reduction for the proportion from ethnic minorities in the organisation. In terms of LGBT numbers, those have actually increased. There's an amendment that needs to be made on the report. For some reason in the formatting, the bar chart's not correct. So for LGB numbers, that should say 2.85% for the 30th of September. In terms of disability, there is a slight reduction. What I will say about disability in the organisation is that we've done a lot over the last few years to make sure that we are providing an environment for people to be able to disclose their disability to the organisation, whether that's when people are going on a training course or when they start in the organisation. We have a self-service functionality within our iTrent system where people can go in and actually disclose their disability. But we're trying to strengthen that at the moment. Tom Briggs, who works on my team, is looking at reasonable adjustments passports, so that we're making sure that people can disclose their disability at any time, but also that information gets shared where it should be. And so we're hoping to introduce that over the next few months. Some work needs to happen in the background on that, on the iTrent system. And some training for managers as well. The other thing that I'd like to draw to your attention is the work that Tracy's obviously talked about around full-time recruitment. We had a firefighter seconded into the EDI team for a period of 6 months, and he was working alongside Gillinder Nagy to develop positive action measures out in the community, careers fairs, festivals, community events. We work with a female football tournament to try and improve applications and attraction rates for firefighting positions from women. And we also ran regular sessions around park runs and fitness sessions as well to try to assist with fitness, that's aerobic and upper body strength as well. So quite a lot of, like intensive activity prior to the recruitment process there. In addition to that, as Tracy mentioned, we're looking at employer branding as well, because we know that we have a unique selling point in this organisation that, you know, people want to work for Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service, and we need to use that brand more effectively. So we've been reviewing our employer branding, not just for the work that we do around whole-time and on-call recruitment for firefighting positions, but also for the support Green Book post that Tracy's been talking about as well. So there's some work happening on that, and so we want to try and improve our presence at careers fairs to make sure that we're more consistent and looking more professional. I suppose finally, in terms of the recommendations, we're asking you to note the report, and then obviously the second recommendation there is for members to agree that we fold this information into the workforce planning paper and subsequent HR updates during the year, and that will be on a 6-month basis as it currently is. So we're not duplicating. We've got some consistency around the numbers that are coming to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Any comments, questions? No.
Thank you. Right. It's page 28, 2.9. The report says from the Bay ethnic group, 2 leavers from the Bay background within the last 6 months, and 3 starters from the Bay background. What reason they left? And you got the replacement 3. That's good news, but I want to know why. What was the reason they left?
I think one was a resignation, and I believe that was a career change, and another one I believe was a resignation in our Green Book cohort as well. So it would be I guess it would go down as personal reasons. We'd have to dig into the exit interviews to see exactly what that detail would be. I don't know if that helps us all.
I think it's the report here, 2.8, says still challenging for the organisation to attract and recruit applicants from the ethnic background. Yeah. I've been on the radio about 3 times, last. I think I went on last year in July on the radio, the Asian radio in Nottingham. Yeah. I did my best to attract people, male and females and everybody. Yeah. So they're not coming forward.
Numbers are low. I think we've been working with Karimia Institute, we've been working with Radio Dawn, Radio Kemet. We've got some more partnership work planned for the next financial year. We want to, because we obviously do the promotion side of things, but we're probably not doing enough to find out the reasons why. So we want to, I think that the work that I want to do from April really is around actually doing some focus groups with communities and saying, well, okay, so what are the barriers? What are the things that are stopping you from applying? Is it knowledge? Is it understanding? Is it that you don't think the fire service is for you? What are the things that are stopping you? So we want to start to dig into some of that a bit more so that we understand the reasons and can hopefully alleviate some of them.
Well, thank you very much. I'll do my best as well.
How do you want to put on that?
Yeah, I think this is really where your point, Councillor Turner, is very pertinent in that many of you will be familiar with Arusa Arshid, who's our Muslim female firefighter, and when she tells her story of why she joined the fire service and wanted to be in the fire service, it was a school visit that happened when she was 5 or 6, and it was that lighted in her the ambition to be part of this service. And I think the earlier we can get to people, just as you've said, the more chance we have of increasing the numbers. And if you look at the figures of our applicants, we are putting an inordinate amount of effort into trying to attract a more diverse applicant pool. And yet, of the 384 applicants that we had for whole time, 50 of them were women, for example. You know, we need to be aiming for 190 of those to be women, don't we? If we're looking at a reflective number. So yes, we're always looking for new ideas, and we do work really hard on this agenda, but it is not always proving easy.
Okay. Tom.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, there's a couple of things to pick up on Gul's point, because I fully agree with him. And let's just, from my point really, is just to say that it's more important than just percentage of the workforce, because obviously we have problems in the Asian community, particularly in Nottingham, with where actually having someone who understands the community better from our point of view would only help those kind of relations, whether it be hoarding, whatever it might be, which we have problems in the Ashfield community with as well. But, and I know I've raised this point many times and you probably roll your eyes, but obviously from my perspective of this report, and particularly from an Ashfield and Mansfield member part of view, obviously we don't have the ethnic diversity. And while I feel this report is very important for the authority as a whole, particularly it doesn't relate to our part of the world, but where it could, and I know you've done a lot of work on it before, and that's the reason I'm just kind of bringing it up as a reminder. Us, it's more the economic scale stuff, and exactly the point with the Muslim female firefighter. It'd be really great to try and encourage people from particularly the council estates, and I'm sure Robert here can name you lots of areas in this part of the world, as I could in mine, where actually people who they can relate to, you know, where I can be a firefighter. They don't have to live in one of the nice new build estates to think they can be a firefighter. Everybody can be a firefighter. And actually it helps us as an organisation, and when we're going into somebody's home to say, look, come on, I'm here to help you, kind of thing, and people relate better to them. So I do feel like a report like this could help us massively as an organisation, not only with the BME populations, but also all parts of the community.
Okay.
So that's kind of my only feedback, and I know you've done a lot of work, particularly in Leamington and Carsick areas, and I know you have, but I think there's always more to do. And my only plea with something like this report would be, could we make it a little bit more inclusive and actually related to all parts of the authority, particularly with, like I say, economic scales, as well as ethnicity and gender, etc.
So we're currently looking at the revised census information from 2021, and we're going to be pulling together some headlines of some of the changes that have taken place in Nottinghamshire and Nottingham City over the last 10 years, and we want to bring that to Policy and Strategy Committee in June, hopefully. What we can do is we can start to bring some of the information around socio-economic deprivation, and we use mosaic data in the organisation as well, so we could start to build a bit of a picture about what we're doing in some of the communities in the county and the city, based on that metric, if you like, and we can, if that's something that you'd like to see, we can start to draw that in. Obviously, we've brought in kind of anecdotal feedback to you before from the sustainability of on-call team and the people who actually do on-call recruitment within mainly the county. But we can obviously bring some more figures in and more data into this, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, and if it's all right through David, just to come back, I mean, the context of my question, and my point really is, you'll be aware that we've obviously had 3 fatality house fires in Ashfield, all kind of probably from that demographic, although obviously there's always complications and differences in every scenario. But then also you'll be aware we as a district council do a thing called the Big Spring Clean, and you've never, particularly in the council estates, and this is where the big problem, because obviously people tend not to have vehicles, unable to take things to the skip themselves.
Yeah.
You look in someone's shed or outbuilding, which is obviously sometimes an outside toilet which is attached to the main building. It's full to the ceiling of old sofas, cushions, everything, massive fire hazard. And of course, kind of roundabout way, we've been able to solve some of these issues by offering people a free collection service.
Yeah.
But I'm also not naive to think that we've probably only touched the top of the iceberg with it, and educating people and being able to do some more of that proactive stuff. And you might say to yourself, well, Tom, why are you raising this as part of the ethnicity report? But actually it's because if somebody in a suit goes round, or even someone well spoken in a fire uniform, people don't want to do it. And I'll share with you one story which I share with our new candidates. I once did a door knocking exercise in my old area. I represent 6,000 people, 3,000 quite affluent, 3,000 private. Wore my suit and tie for the whole thing, and I couldn't understand why 60% of people were answering the door in the new build estates, and I was getting maybe 2 or 3% of the council estates. People weren't answering the door.
Yeah.
But then when I put my more relaxed outfit on,
Yeah.
I'm getting loads of people answering.
Yeah.
And I think, and I know it sounds like it's a really silly thing,
Yeah.
but that's how people behave, and that's it, isn't it? And that's
Yeah.
my worry. So if there's a way we can work something like this into a report like this, I do genuinely believe it'd have a massive impact. And that's probably my only feedback as part of it.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get away from the fact that you've done a lot of great work already, because we've spoke about it before.
Thank you.
Okay. I think it's another comprehensive report, well targeted. I like the idea of getting to part ones and when people are half fit then already, not a bad idea. And I think it's really important that the authority works well with all the communities that we serve, really. I think targeting schools in the communities that are the areas that we need to get to is, I think, incredibly important. So I think that's probably one of the important things, is when we choose what schools we go to, we choose schools in the areas that we need to get to. Maybe some economic deprivation, it might be in areas where we've got high numbers of ethnic groups. If we've got to try and get the workforce to look like the community that we serve, and not be sort of just one-dimensional, then that's, I think the schools are as good a way to get there as we possibly can. Really. Okay, well, members happy to note the report and agree to combine it with the workplace planning report and subsequent human resources updates. Yeah, 6 months. Okay, great, thanks. We'll move on to, find it. Item 7, Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services areas for improvement. Damien.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. You'll be aware at the Fire Authority meeting in September, the outcome report was presented to members around Her Majesty's inspection from last year. And in that report, there were 4 areas for improvement that were highlighted by Her Majesty's, or His Majesty's Inspector as it is now. That is a reduction of from 24 areas for improvement from the previous inspection, so a marked improvement. The proposal was made to full authority and supported to undertake the same mechanism in terms of tracking those areas for improvement across the service and monitoring and applying scrutiny, and that was to delegate those to the committees for their completion. Of the 4 areas for improvement, 1 has been aligned to the HR committee for scrutiny, and this report details the content of that and the outline of the timeline that members should be able to observe in terms of progress against it. So the area for improvement that's been delegated to this committee for scrutiny is that the service should assure itself that staff understand how to get wellbeing support. So as Tracy mentioned earlier in her workforce update, the service currently provides quite a wide range of different types of both physical and mental wellbeing support for employees across both operational and Green Book roles. And there is a lot of information available through the service's intranet, the service's occupational health department, and also in terms of proactive engagement with our workforce as well. However, during the inspection by HMIC, it was highlighted that crews had concerns around the availability and the lack of consistency in terms of particularly post-incident support. So it's therefore clear that there is a lack of consistency in terms of the understanding of the offer that's available to people to support them after particularly traumatic incidents. In the period since we are receiving that report, we've undertaken a gap analysis between the information provided in the inspection, where we believe we are in areas for improvement. We've also looked at what other services and organisations do, which have been accoladed as performing highly in this area. And there are now a range of steps highlighted in section 2.7, which the service is going to undertake to try and increase both the offer but also the awareness and understanding of that. And you'll see from the 5 tasks which are captured, a lot of it's around engagement with the workforce, making sure that our communication tools are effective and that people can understand what is available to them. And also now, as we're coming back into business as usual after the COVID period, there's a hope with a newly established occupational health team that there'll be proactive engagement with stations and workplaces again, just to highlight some of the provisions that are available to them. So work formally started on this area for improvement in September 22 last year, and it is planned to progress through this year till September 2023. So progress will be monitored internally through the CRMP Assurance Board, which is chaired by the Chief Fire Officer, and it will be reported to members of regular updates with progress against that AFI. A key part of what His Majesty's Inspectorate now looks for is around evaluation. So it's really important that before this is presented back to members, ultimately to be completed, there'll be some evaluation that's undertaken around it, and that will look through the staff survey in terms of understanding staff feedback internally, and also the engagement events will be evaluated to make sure we have that engagement with staff and we can see that it's adding value. So, as I mentioned, regular updates will be brought back through this committee against the timeline, and members will be kept abreast of any developments, but happy to take any questions on the paper. Thank you.
Comments, questions? No. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, really. I suppose, really, the thing I would say is that the work carried out here will tie in to future, really, human resources reports and tie into the other work that this committee does, really. And look forward to getting where the Majesty's Inspectorate get to where they think we should be.
Absolutely.
Really.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 8. Apprenticeship. Oh, yeah, we'll agree the recommendations.
Yeah.
I kind of took no questions as being another agreement. Item 8, apprenticeship update, Candida.
Yeah, I'll take that, Chair. Thank you. So this is a report for noting, members. We would have brought this to the committee that was postponed at the end of last year, and it brings an update on the detail of our apprenticeship programme within the service. It's a good news report, I'm glad to say. From 2.1 to 2.5, there's a description there of how we run our apprenticeship programme for operational firefighters, how that functions and the elements within it. And from 2.6, the ratification that we've received through Ofsted inspection that has judged us good with elements of outstanding right across the board, which is extremely pleasing to us. It endorses the approach that we've been taking and shows that the outcomes are something that are pleasing to Ofsted. And we all know that is an inspectorate that can be incredibly difficult to please. So that's very good news for us. We also outline here the other apprenticeships that are here within the service at the moment across the range of other functions within the service, and this is something that has as has been highlighted through the meeting today, is something that we're looking to develop further so that we can expand the range of opportunities that can count as apprenticeships, with a view to that strengthening us in terms of recruitment and retention and development of our workforce. At 3, we outline the financial implications, and I think the main thing that I just want to highlight here is I know that many large employers really struggle to utilise the contribution that they give to the apprenticeship levy, and it's something that we're able to fully draw down. So again, that's an added bonus really to the approach that we're taking. And I think, Chair, those would be the main points that I would highlight.
Okay, any comments, questions on this? Go.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the page 47, 2.8, the FSTED, for they'll say further routine inspection for FSTED for at least 5 years. Is it happening every 5 years or in this full inspection?
What they've given us is that grace period of 5 years. It could be longer. I guess that will depend on how the inspectorate determines it wants to proceed. But by getting such a good grade, it means that we won't be under the spotlight for that period at least.
Thank you very much. That's good news,
Yeah.
All these areas good and outstanding and that. Yeah, that's very nice one. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else any comments, questions? I think apprenticeships are massively important. I started one in 14th of April 1971 and I'm glad they're still going.
I started one on 8th of September 1986, so I feel the same.
Yeah. And I think it really, 2.10, it shows you the kind of wide range of tasks that they do as well.
Yes.
And it's really important that we get that skill set following through, coming up through the next generation. And I think that they're a much better way of employment than universities. So, anyway, so members have to agree with recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, okay, so independent culture review of London Fire Brigade, Matt.
Okay, so you'll most likely be aware that LFB have undertaken this investigation. It was on the news a lot before Christmas. It was actually as part of an internal investigation into the death of firefighter Jane Matthew Francois Esprit, who took his own life. But also I think in relation to other reports of harassment and bullying and other cultural issues in the organisation. So they've commissioned this review, really far-reaching. It took over 12 months and heard from over 2,000 current and former members of staff and community groups. I suppose the reason for bringing this into the HR committee is because obviously there's been some other issues around the sector. So there's been some stuff in South Wales, cases in the West Midlands, and these have been quite high profile and all over the news, and potentially demonstrating some issues in the sector that have previously been raised by HMI. But it's really to reassure members that we're not doing anything about the development of the culture in the organisation. So the report itself went into a range of areas and made a set of recommendations which have been outlined at 2.3 for you. What we have done is we've gone through all of the recommendations to see which might be relevant to this organisation, which actually we think may not be. That's been those. I suppose that analysis has now been sent to our strategic leadership team and to our employee network, so that they can have a look at that as well. And both groups are going to be coming back with their views on what we think needs to change. This is obviously in addition to the equalities agenda in the organisation and the action plans that we have in terms of workforce and service delivery as well. So just bringing you onto the NFRS context of the report, which starts at 2.4. There's an acknowledgement in here that the work in terms of diversity, workforce diversity, needs to improve, and the numbers that I presented to you earlier aren't good enough, and we need to continue to maintain momentum in that area. The work that we've done with staff networks over the last 18 months has been really great, and is starting to bear fruit. So it's not just a group of people sitting in a room talking about how the organisation is. They're actually wanting to move things forwards and running with some of the work that they're identifying and that we're identifying. We've also undertaken a review of training. So we did an EDI review in 2021, and we've been working on an action plan during 2022. And part of that has been around reviewing the training that we provide for our firefighters and all of our staff. Some of this is about mainstreaming equality issues into our operational training. So making sure that when we are training someone to provide first aid or to cut someone out of a car, that we're considering different identities, different disabilities, and people from different backgrounds when we're providing that emergency rescue and care and support. We're also piloting an inclusive leadership programme for our middle managers. That was something that was identified in our internal report, and the first part of that happened this week, and the second part is happening later on this month, I believe. And then we also have the staff survey, which happens every 2 years. We had data from that that came through to us July of last year. We've been working through that information, and we're now working with the provider to make sure that we are dealing with any of the issues that have come out of that. Generally, it seems that line managers and teams are looking after one another, and that the levels of satisfaction and morale in the organisation are generally good. But there are some highlights in the report that came back from the provider that we need to look at, and we're going to be carrying on doing that over the next 12 months. In addition to that, at 2.10 under next steps, we're going to be releasing a joint statement between the Fire Authority and the Chief Fire Officer, so the Chair and the Chief, and employee networks and other key stakeholders as well, just to make sure people understand that we are aware of this report, and we are continuing our good work to improve the culture of Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. And then at 2.11, I've just outlined a few of the key headlines for you about what we're going to be doing this year in terms of EDI and broader organisational development work. And that's it. Any questions?
Questions, comments? Okay, well, I'm pleased that we've got it here. I think it's, we've got to look at what's happened elsewhere and learn from that. I think it's especially when you run an organisation which can be seen as quite a monoculture,
Yeah.
and that makes it even more important in a sense, really. And I think that we as a committee and authority need to do all we can to make sure that we are a good and responsible employer to work for, and that's the job of this authority and the job of this committee, really, in a sense. And we have to make sure that gets right through every level, right through to the front line and everything else. So I think it's important that we pick this up at the right time. It could have been anywhere else but London that happened to, but it's really, really important to learn from the lessons and act on that really. So, well, thanks for bringing it. Okay, so exclusion of the public, item 10. Consider excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the remaining items in accordance with Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under Schedule 12A, Part 1. On that basis, that having regard to all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. And the public have gone.
Just